Namo Orientanum, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Aryanam, Namo Vijayinam, Namo Loa Savasavanam, Eso Panchanamokaro, Sava Paupanasano, Manglanam Jasavisim, Paramam Bhave Manglam. Thank you and Jai Jinendra, everyone. My name is Sunny Jain, and on behalf of the Global Jain Network, we would like to thank all of you for joining us today, no matter which part of the world you're from. A little bit about the Global Jain Network. This is a club that we started about a year ago now. And since then, we've connected over 13,000 Jains, primarily during the midst of the pandemic. And we did so by hosting curated events, some in professional nature. We've had social rooms, professional rooms, religious rooms. And essentially, this has been our way to bring Jains together, like-minded Jains, and talking over a variety of different topics. Um, in these conversations, a topic that tended to reoccur is the theme of business ethics. And as Jains, how can we align ourselves in the business world, in a way that is aligned with our values? Obviously, the workplace is continuing to evolve, and as we start to question how do we apply our ethics in this modern workplace, I think it brings about a lot of very interesting conversations and questions. And so, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Dr. Miller, and then followed by Miheer, Dr. Nand, Komal, and then Kobby. And just give you a chance to introduce yourself. Maybe if you want to share a few words about who you are, what do you do, and why this topic interests you. So with that, we'll start with Dr. Miller.
Jai Jinendra, everyone, and thank you so much, Sunny, for inviting me and collaborating with us. My name is Dr. Christopher Jain Miller. I'm the Chief Academic Officer at Arihanta Academy. We're an online platform for teaching and democratizing Jain studies worldwide. One of the topics that we really have been thinking about a lot as well, and why we're so excited to collaborate with Sunny and the Global Jain Network, is Jain professional ethics. And we are also excited that Dr. Anand Vaidya, one of our faculty, is on this panel amongst other esteemed Jains to talk about this very important topic. We all have so much to offer to this conversation, and I look forward to jumping in with you all. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll pass the mic to Miheer.
Hey, Sunny. Thank you so much for the invitation. Um, and as Dr. Miller said, very happy to be here among this amazing group. So professionally, my background has been in management consulting at the intersection of cybersecurity, venturing into food tech, specifically around plant-based focus. And excited to be here, to join in on this conversation. On the personal note, I grew up in India, in a Jain environment, moved to the States in the 80s. And so, having sort of the perspectives has been kind of interesting, in how, I've been able to sort of interact, engage with various different perspectives. So looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Miheer. Next, we'll pass the mic to Dr. Nand.
Oh, okay. Jai Janendra, everyone. Thank you very much, Sunny, for inviting me to this wonderful conversation. I am a professor at Arihanta Academy, along with Chris, but I'm also a professor of philosophy at San Jose State University, where I've been teaching for about 17 years, and I have about 25 years teaching experience as a philosophy professor, including all the places I've taught globally and in America. So, my interest in this topic is that I teach business ethics. I've taught it for quite a while at my own university and at a couple of other universities. And I have published two textbooks, one in business ethics and one in professional ethics, both of which are now in their second edition, as well as a series of case study books for business ethics. My background is actually in mathematical logic and philosophy of mind and epistemology. I study a lot of the core areas of philosophy, and for the last about 12 years, I've been working to advance the introduction of and presentation of various traditions of Indian philosophy within academia, and to bring it to bear on contemporary debates about topics that are not just about Indian philosophy, but to bring Indian philosophy from different traditions to bear in these debates. And one of the things I've worked most heavily on in Jainism is working out ideas about how Jain thinking can inform and improve critical thinking education around the world. I'm very honored to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing that, Anand. Next, we'll pass the mic to Komal.
Jaden and everyone, thank you, Sunny, for inviting me into this. This is really amazing. Um, I am actually an engineer turned program management working for a school district. So we see a lot of trying to incorporate multiple religions and accommodating and helping out students of various religions so we can make sure that everyone is included, creating this culture of we. But along with that, I also am my own business owner where I have my own dance company and events planning company. And it's been a challenge to try to incorporate the fact that we are Jains into a world that doesn't necessarily follow Jainism, especially in the event planning business, and not everybody is even vegetarian. So it's been a fun challenge, and looking forward to sharing that experience.
Thank you so much, Komal. Finally, we'll pass the mic to Kobby.
Hello, Sunny. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. My name is Kobby, and professionally, I run a nonprofit that is funding educational programs for the disabled in Ghana, which is where I am from. I also run a hardware startup building EV charging stations. And I got interested in this path after my MBA, where with looking back on it, I realized that, and through working in corporate America, really kind of realizing that the orientation of management is from the really kind of focused on the outside, on the tangibles and what can be measured and what can be put on the balance sheet, and realizing that if we view ourselves as sort of spiritual beings having a physical experience, then management really ignores the deeply spiritual aspect of our humanity. And so conversations with Miheer, thanks for inviting me here, has been really thinking about what I'm calling sacred management, which is really starting from the inside out, which is very, very much aligned with Jainism. So excited to be here.
That is incredible. I'm really grateful for this diverse panel of speakers. I think all of you bring to the table a very interesting perspective when it comes to business ethics, Jainism, and just social impact as well. And so, before we begin the conversation, I do want to give Chris a opportunity to share a little bit about Arihanta Academy. This is a partner of Global Jain Network, and they are actually offering a course on Jain business ethics. I think in today's world, I think it's a very unique opportunity to find Jain education that is aligned with modern application. And so, just really grateful for our partner in that. So, Chris, if you want to share a little bit more information, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunny, for the opportunity. Jai Janendra again, everyone. Good to see you. So yes, I'm Dr. Christopher Jain Miller, and I'm the Chief Academic Officer at Arihanta Academy. I also teach there as a professor, and I actually see some of my students in the audience here. So thank you all for coming. I just want to give a warm welcome and again thank Global Jain Network for this collaboration. We both think this is such an important topic, and part of what we're trying to do at Arihanta Academy is really emphasize why and how Jain principles absolutely 100% apply in this contemporary context that we're in, where we have so many social and environmental challenges and everything that we know that's going on. One of the biggest things that we all have to worry about, of course, is how are we going to put food on the table? How are we going to put shelter over our heads? But how are we going to do that in a way that is as ethical as possible, with as little harm as possible? And really, that was really the motivation behind putting together this business ethics panel with all of the esteemed colleagues who are here. Now, that being said, we do have a course coming up that starts on April 16th, so this coming Saturday. And this course is with Dr. Anand Vaidya, who's actually on our panel here today, Jain Professional Ethics. And I'll let Dr. Anand Vaidya say more about that later. But basically, this is a course where you will not only learn about Western ethics, but you'll see the contribution that the overlooked contribution that Jain ethics have to make to the workplace for the betterment of society and of the environment and all of these challenges that we face. So, if anyone's interested in joining that course, we decided we would give a scholarship today, a free scholarship. If anyone wants to come, we have a code for our website. I'll paste it in the chat later. It's A Spring 2022. If anybody wants to join that class after we're done here, I sincerely hope that you will. As someone who used to work in consulting at major Big Four firms and stuff like that, and always wanted to know, how can we change the system that's destroying the planet? What can we do? I think this is one of the most important conversations that we need to be having right now, and I really look forward to nurturing that conversation here and into the future. Jajanendra, thanks so much, Sunny.
No, thank you so much. And as you see, we actually have a chat feature on the bottom left corner of your screen. So this is something that Clubhouse has just created maybe like a month ago. And so, I would encourage all the audience to write in the chat as well during the conversation. If there's anything that resonates with you, if there's any comments or any questions in general, feel free to write in the chat. And we're going to try to make this particular event as open format as possible. And so as we're having conversation, we encourage all of you to raise your hand, join us on the stage, and definitely share your perspective as well, because I think every perspective is going to be very unique, especially when it comes to this topic. And depending on your industry, your career, your function, I think all of you are going to have a very interesting story. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Dr. Nand. If you want to share a little bit about Jain business ethics as a discipline and perhaps how that even intersects with Jainism, please feel free.
Okay, Jay Janendra, everyone, again, and thank you very much for this opportunity. So I think maybe I'll just say something short that can give people a perspective from the education side, and it'll help them understand a little bit more about the significance of Jainism in business ethics. So the key idea to first understand is that business ethics is a requirement for all students who get a business degree at any university. And it's also an MBA requirement. All MBA programs require that there is some training in business ethics, whether or not it's in a separate business ethics course or it's in a specific module of a given course. So, for example, at my university, I have about 2,000 students that we teach from my philosophy department every year in business ethics. And there's been generations of students that have come from our university, and all universities work this way. So, it's a very big enterprise in the United States of America. It's also a requirement in England and even in parts of India. If you go to an IIM, you're most likely going to study business ethics to some degree. The history of the discipline shows that there is a dominant trend towards secular ethics, meaning ethical traditions that do not particularly make use or reference to any religious doctrines. That is the standard model that has been run for probably close to 60 years, at least in the United States, and it has been pretty strong in the past 30 years in California at all the major institutions. And although there are courses where you can learn about religious ways of intersecting ideas in business ethics, the standard model that's taught in all of the business classes is the secular version. But there has been a growing trend, I would say, over the past 8 years of people who have been trying to introduce ideas from religious traditions into business ethics. And that can be said about people both from like Christian traditions in the United States of America or England, Islamic traditions, and also from various Indian traditions, be it Hindu, Jain, or Buddhist ethics into business ethics. And this is a growing trend that is controversial, though. It is hotly debated whether or not religious ideas have an important place to play in business ethics. I have been a proponent of the view that it's perfectly acceptable and Jainism has a lot to offer. And I believe that one of the challenges that Jainism faces in the business ethics education area, not just the application within the workplace, is making clear to those that aren't Jains how their principles work in a way that identifies decisions and actions and policies that we can stand behind based on argumentation from Jain ideas. And so that's what I promote. And I'm working heavily with Chris and other members of Arihanta Academy to make this a realization and to foster more discussions on business ethics, both in terms of conferences and publications and the application of core Jain ideas to specific problems, and to show the relevance of Jainism within business ethics. That's sort of what the goal is of this class and what we're trying to do. And I'll just close by saying that one of the important ways in which I think this is done is by the comparative approach. So I'm also the director of the Center for Comparative Philosophy at San Jose State University. And on a comparative model, what we're trying to do is look at the contributions of various Jain thinkers in relationship to the standard figures that are taught, such as Aristotle, Immanuel Kant, John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, um, W.D. Ross. All of these figures have contributed heavily to secular ethics in business ethics. And the key idea is to first learn what they had to say and then to understand how Jainism contributes to those very same discussions. So thank you very much once again for letting me participate.
I think that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I think that gives us a lot of insight, especially those that aren't familiar with business ethics as a discipline, on kind of the evolving nature of it and how we're incorporating religion into a secular discipline as well. And so I guess I'll go ahead and kick off the conversation. This is going to be the roundtable part of the conversation. So if anyone in the audience wants to join us on the stage and share any thoughts or comments, please feel free. Uh, the first question I just want to ask the panelists is, how do you incorporate Jainism or your aligned values in the workplace? And I can go ahead and start off like my personal story, and then feel free to jump in. And what we'll do is we'll do the one mic policy. So if no one else is speaking, feel free to unmute and share your thoughts. And so we'll kind of do it that way. So the way I, as a Jain, incorporate Jainism into the workplace. So a little bit about myself. I currently work at a financial sector company, and we go into the office. And as a Jain, I think one of the most I guess defining characteristics of a Jain is we're vegetarian, right? And so I am personally vegan. And so when it comes to like dietary preferences, when it comes to clothing, I will take certain actions to ensure that I'm reducing suffering to animals at the workplace as well. And so I think that comes in the form of the clothing I wear. And so whenever we wear dress shoes, I'll find like a vegan alternative. So I'll wear vegan dress shoes, for example. Instead of like a leather briefcase, I actually have like a vegan computer bag as well. In terms of belts, which is obviously part of like the business attire, I have a vegan belts that I wear as well, which is essentially just synthetic material rather than like the like cowhide, right, leather. Um, in terms of the workplace, I think sometimes you work with different people, different personalities. Sometimes there's internal conflict, and so the way I like to try to use Jainism whenever possible is that whenever there is a internal conflict within a team, for example, I will try to incorporate Anand. I'll try to, you know, to meditate sometimes, try to like figure out, okay, maybe we have a difference in opinion, and try to incorporate Jainism where I can understand their opinion as well. And so like that helps me with conflict management, settling differences. And sometimes if things don't go your way, how does Jainism allow me to reflect and then kind of get back on track? So that's a little bit about how I incorporate Jainism. We'd love to hear if others have any thoughts on how they incorporate Jainism at the workplace.
Hey, Sonny, I can jump in. This is me here. Love that perspective, right? It's the the mindset and the philosophy that gets translated in a physical manner that we as humans sort of sense, right, through one of the sense organs, sight. Um, yeah. So similarly, the characteristics and attributes of the philosophy, being vegetarian or thoughtfulness, situational awareness, in terms of understanding, empathizing, with different feelings or what somebody's kind of going through. Those are sort of the initial sort of perspectives that come into mind. But in terms of incorporating Jainism, so with the startup, I was actually this was a pretty massive struggle for me, because how do I create a entity that incorporates these values without labeling the different perspectives, right? Whether it's Jainism or from a Christianity point of view, or Islam or Buddhism, Judaism, etc. Because there is some level of synergy between the different labels, I'll call it, right? And these are sort of the common values and virtues. So one of the things that I was working on with my attorney, with the bylaws, for example, or the corporate governance documents, incorporating some of the basic fundamental elements that Anand has brought up, from the business ethics point of view, that how so theft or embezzlement, right? As an example, to remove directors, or mismanagement of company assets and resources, not just cash, but it could be, from a environmental perspective, and then how that translates into partnerships. Because one of the things with the food tech space is, we a lot of the everything, basically, not a lot, but everything around us, the tangible material things, where do they come from? Right? One source, there's the earth. And so, let's minimize extracting, resources, and let's see if there's sort of a non-zero sum game manner where we can sort of partner. So those are just a couple of examples, from corporate bylaws, and then that permeates throughout the organization. But I'd love to hear, many, and there are so many other ways to do this. So I'm very curious to, learn from the perspectives, phenomenal perspectives that are represented here, both on stage, but also hopefully in the audience. Thanks.
Absolutely. And if anyone else wants to share their thoughts on how do you incorporate Jainism or your values into the workplace, this could be, very micro level, so your day to day, or if you want to talk more of a higher level of your industry or business, please feel free. Also, there's some great chat comments in the audience. If you do want to join us on the stage, we welcome you to raise your hand as well. I think there's some very great comments regarding sustainability, as well as for example, harassment, labor, fair working conditions, all these things that kind of fall under that category, and where Jainism intersects with all of that. So I guess I'll go ahead and call on people. We'll kind of do it that way. But Komal, you had mentioned that you are involved in event planning, and I can imagine that you know, part of event planning is catering to client needs, and essentially whatever the client wants, that we want to accommodate them to the best of our abilities. Uh, are there any challenges when it comes to as a Jain and being in this business that you can think of? And what would be like what do you think would be the best way to go about it?
No, absolutely. That is actually one of the biggest challenges I'm facing right now. And it's becoming less and less of an issue the further along we get into this world, and the light of how animals are treated are coming into play. Um, there are, and I think I've been lucky in this sense, is there are a couple of weddings that I've been able to convince them to do a pure, at least vegetarian diet, which has been pretty good. But I do start off with the small things like how do we not incorporate eggs into the cake? And the first thing I do is I try to understand the clients and see what are they willing to accommodate. Some are just not willing to listen to anything. I mean, you can't get anything through their heads. So getting to know the clients is the biggest thing and understanding where they're into. And the I think the hardest thing is trying to get them to go full vegetarian if they're not. But what I have done is I've worked with these people and said, hey, people will eat veggies. You always need more veggies in your diet. You can have one meat option versus 10 meat options within like the buffet style of an event. Or, hey, if it's an Indian wedding, I'm able to be like, we're in the presence of God. Do you really want to have meat in front of God? But it's also something that you can't force on them because, of course, in the end, it's their own wedding and you want them to be happy. But having giving them that perspective in a casual conversation and not necessarily in a point to fact way and kind of bringing it in and making them think that it's their idea has probably been the biggest thing that I do, but also keeping in mind of who they are. I've had fully Christian weddings. Had, I've had almost every single type. I'm doing a Greek one right now, and they absolutely, absolutely want meat. But the problem is that, they also feed the vendors. Well, half the vendors I give them are also all vegetarian, and we're all within the same boat. Not necessarily being Jain, but at least being on the vegetarian side or slowly going towards that or veganism as a whole. And having those vendors there, especially the caterers, helps. And making that partnership with those caterers helps because they're able to give them a better rate. Now they think they're saving money. In reality, we're also trying to kind of help them see that, okay, they don't necessarily have to have meat in their day-to-day thing or for big events and things like that. And start off small, not necessarily go into a huge change, but one event at a time and try to work that in through the conversations.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible. It's a very difficult position, and you trying to find ways to even offer or even share, hey, maybe there's a different way to do it. I think it's great that you're even trying, right? And obviously, when it comes to like vegetarianism, that is a big part of, I think, a lot of Jains when they talk about the workplace, they talk about challenges related to diet. And so I know in my previous employer, it was a point where whenever there was a company lunch, there was nothing to eat at all, right, for vegetarians. And I was here in Texas, so it was even vegetarianism was a thing that a lot of people didn't know about. And so one thing that I tried to do is try to like, and not in a very like aggressive way, but I would try to politely say, "Hey, is there any options for vegetarians?" Sometimes I would actually email like the HR person prior to the event itself, or like the event planner, and ask, "Hey, is there going to be any options?" Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no, but at least you're kind of building awareness. And I've noticed that the more that I started asking, eventually they realized that, hey, there are people like at our company that do want these options, and then they found a way to incorporate it into it. And so I think, and this was maybe a few years ago, and I think in today's time, most larger corporations have options for various dietary preferences, which wasn't a thing a few years ago. And so, uh, I would definitely recommend anyone that's at a whichever company you work at to be a little bit more vocal about it. I think there are times where we're a little bit afraid to share our values or kind of showcase that, hey, this is what I eat, this is what I like. Um, if like the company's having like a dinner at a steakhouse, obviously it's a little tough as a Jane to kind of just like play along and follow along, right? Because I think it's important that we are a little bit more vocal, and once again doing it in a way where we're not, encroaching our values on others, but rather sharing the, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with. If anyone else has any thoughts, please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, Sunny, thank you for saying that. You reminded me of, one of the ways that I try to do it at the university specifically is I try to look for organizations that already embody and incorporate Jain values, even if they don't proclaim them to be Jain values. So, and a good example of this is the organization Default Veg. Many of you have probably heard of Default Veg before. It's an organization that basically tries to reduce harm by taking meat and taking animal products out of the menu, out of the ingredients, and only putting them as something that you have to ask for if you want them. So essentially, you can order anything on the menu; it'll taste great, but it won't have any animal in it. You have to ask for animal to be in it. And what's been shown, the research has shown, is that that actually reduces by far, at an astronomical level, it reduces the amount of animal products that people consume, which is of course better not only for the animals but for the environment as well as for their health. And so what I've tried to do, like at the university, and it's something that's still a work in progress, but is I found this organization, Default Veg, and they found me actually in this case, and I thought, wow, your values really align with mine, with the Jain principle of ahimsa and compassion. And I then brought them into the university to try to persuade the university to go default veg, meaning the entire university would serve only vegan food, and the option would be there for people who have to have meat for whatever reason. They could order it, or cheese or whatever. But I found that to be like partnering with organizations who already kind of do this work can be really an effective way to not only to show people the values, but make even structural changes that are implementing Jain values without even calling them that, if that makes sense. So yeah, thanks. Just reminded me of that.
Yeah, I'd like to
That's
mention.
something.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's something, that reminds me of something that I also, in the actual like corporate world, right, is I work for a school system. And the way that our departments work is whenever we have anything that is on a higher level, even within the school system for the kids' lunches, the people who are in charge of that don't necessarily understand what being a vegetarian is. And being in the Bay Area, there's a lot of vegetarians here, and the Jain community is pretty big, especially in the district I work in. That's exactly where the Mandir is. And knowing that we're there and having that opportunity also gave us the understanding and the ability to talk to whoever's in charge of all the food for the kids to make sure that the vegetarian foods are also Jain friendly foods. So especially during Prayushan time, we've as a district, we've gone to and had meetings in terms of what are the religious dietary restrictions that we have at certain times. And we've gotten them to accommodate Jains during Paryushan and thus Lakshan, and to make sure that, all the kids have a fair shot of having a warm meal, or if they're not bringing it from home or don't have the opportunity to bring it from home. We all know that parents are busy and not necessarily are able to create a proper meal for lunch. I mean, I had that issue growing up, even though my mom worked super hard to give me proper food during das Lakshan. But giving the opportunity at schools to even have that is a huge step forward, and it's something that we've finally been able to accomplish within this city itself.
Yeah, I just like to add too. In terms of eating habits at my university, there's a lot of commonality with what Chris was saying. We have a lot of people who are vegetarians who are philosophy students and philosophy graduate students and professors. And so we've almost flipped the script where like people who are meat eaters are oftentimes complaining like how come we don't have any meat options and stuff because we sort of default into doing vegetarian meals and vegan meals too because we have a lot of vegans also, and there's a difference between those two. And so yeah, I think sometimes just like trying to get people to understand that like what they take to be the default might not be the default for everyone is sort of like the opening insight that leads the way. And as we try to like have bigger events on campus, we kind of do that ideology. We always say like, well, we have to realize that the default might be switching when we increase the number of people and the diversity of people. So we kind of do the same thing.
Maybe I would chime in here with a couple of thoughts. I think the first, thought for me is that it starts from us, right? Or it starts from me and my practice of incorporating my understanding of the holistic nature of humans into sort of everything that we do. So, if I'm thinking about my customers, my responsibility is to understand that they're not just sort of physical beings, but there are other dimensions of them. So in terms of incorporating um, what is aligned with me in the workplace, I think the first work really kind of starts for myself in making sure that in every activity that I'm doing, I am um, aligned with what is the totality of my person, but also the totality of whether it's a customer or another person that I'm interacting with. And I find that when I'm in that place, every interaction, sort of changes. I think the struggle that I have is building a management team that is that is um, seeing people not just again as flesh and blood, but as fully spiritual beings. And that has been, the language that we use in management, the ways that we interact, really kind of views labor as a formula, right? What can people do, and how much do we pay them? And it doesn't incorporate, or it's starting to more incorporate, things like diet, which is what we're talking about, sort of religious practices. But really, I think we don't even have the language to fully incorporate um, the inner practices into what the more mundane practices that we're doing in the business world. So I would say my approach is to start from myself first, making sure that I am approaching things holistically. But then the challenge that I find is finding teams and management who are, um, call it spiritually aware, and view every person as a fully multidimensional being, rather than sort of this is just another customer we need to close or another partner that we need to work with.
Kobby, I really appreciate that. The from a business context, it's I saw in the chat somebody had actually talked about the labels or the language, right? The nomenclature that we use, uh, so that everybody's kind of looking at things from the same viewpoint or similar perspective at least. When it comes to the non-harm type of tenets, ahimsa, et cetera, and things that we've been talking about from a dietary point of view, but it goes beyond that, right? What is the reason or the root for why is somebody vegetarian or vegan? And so similar to exactly what Kabi just brought up, the struggle with developing or finding those individuals to shape the management team so that there's a multiplier effect, right? So that if I'm bringing on somebody who has at least some alignment with the philosophy and the perspective, then the multiplier effect just becomes that much less cumbersome, right? Because then if the CFO is looking at things not just from dollars and cents point of view, but obviously that's how the incentive models work. Unfortunately, the valuations, things of that nature, which I do sense and feel things are evolving. Um, Looking at how capital markets are incentivizing, certain, we'll call it trends for now, but there is an evolution in the food system. And in that, the Credit Suisse, chairman and CEO, the incoming Credit Suisse chairman and CEO, his first global report was on the food system. And verbatim, I mean, he's saying that the world needs to adopt a plant-based diet, right? And so he's coming at it from a different perspective, even though he initially may not have been vegan or vegetarian, whatnot, right? But it's again, there are how do we, the struggle is really how do we one to piggyback on what Kabi was saying, and what I think Anna and Chris have also brought up, is creating this lexicon, right? So that you know, it one attracts the right tribe or the right type of people, and that's an open question, right? How have each of you attracted similar mindsets? What practically and pragmatically have you done which attracts the like-minded, like-hearted individuals? And then second is from the corporate point of view, private sector at least, for profit, I should say. What are some practical approaches to scaling that? Right, it's the root of it, which the philosophy and the values and virtues is what we would like to multiply through the product or service offering. Thanks.
I'll go ahead and add a comment to maybe the last few things that were said. So they say that there's whenever you're within a system, right? So let's talk about like an organization. Whether you're entry level, in the middle of like the organization, or if you're like a top level manager, uh, there's multiple ways to implement change within an organization. And so the way we look at it is there's a top down approach and a bottom up approach. And so the top down approach is essentially being in a position of influence where you can facilitate change in the workplace, right? And so even if you're like a higher level manager at a large organization, you may be in a place where you can incorporate certain changes, whether it is something like just the food that's offered at the company at company events, or something greater like directing the strategy and determining like the company vision, right, and making it more aligned with values that are more aligned with your values, right? So, for example, if there's a meeting and there's a decision to go a certain way, you can be a person that says, "Hey, I think we should do it this way instead," because of the following reasons, right? Whether it's sustainability, better for the planet, socially better, whatever you want to say. The other approach is the bottom up approach. And essentially, what that means is more of a grassroots effort. This is essentially sending employee feedback, right? So you, as an employee, can send feedback upward, say, hey, this is what I like, this is what we want, and we would prefer it this way, right? This is the example of me sending an email right before a company lunch and saying that, hey, are there vegetarian options at this event? So things like that can help, cause a ripple effect and help facilitate change at a larger scale as well. And so I think that kind of like resonated when when Chris and Anand were sharing at the university level what you can do to kind of facilitate change within an organization to make it more aligned with our values. And I say our values as in from the Jain standpoint or just like from the ethical standpoint, right? And then I think what Miheer and Kobby said about even finding like-minded people, right, on the leadership team, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, you're starting your own business, you obviously want to have people beside you that share certain values with you. And so, how do you do that? How do you find that person? Perhaps during the interview process, the recruiting process, you include a few questions beyond just their hard and soft skills. Add a few questions that ensure you that, hey, this is the person that shares like the company vision with uh, that shares the similar values with the company vision. So something like that. And so that would be just a few thoughts. If anyone else wants to share anything, please feel free. And I also see Nisha and Apurva has joined the stage, by the way. And we're just doing roundtable format, so completely open format. If no one else is speaking, feel free to unmute and talk.
If I may, just really quick, Sonny, I just want to let people know that I dropped a free resource in the chat. It's a book called Jaina Yoga that was written in the 1960s, but has a lot of really interesting summaries of a lot of things about the Jain tradition, particularly for lay householders. And it actually has Hemachandra's entire list of forbidden professions. And I think it's really interesting because it shows you that from the start, since Jains started doing business, and historically Jains are of course famous for being the most trustworthy business people, and that's why everyone wanted to do business with them. But it shows that part of the main reason for that is that the bedrock of why they chose the professions that they did and the professions that they did not choose as well, that they forbid, was grounded in the ethic of nonviolence. So I recommend anyone in here who's interested in learning more about that, you can find the page about the professions in Hemachandra's list in that free resource that the PDF that's in the chat. Thanks.
Hi, Jay Janendra, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to the stage, Sunny. I just wanted to share something. I have heard of that list. I actually don't know if my profession is on it. I need to check. But I'm a TV writer, and when I first I went to film school, and I always, from a very young age, knew that's what I wanted to do. And I remember having a conversation with my grandma, who was very well educated in Jainism, and was a devout and very avid reader of Jain texts. And when I told her what I wanted to do, there was like this initial reaction that she had that I was going to be going into an industry that meant I had to lie, right? So I like fabricate stories, and that's what I do for a living. Like essentially is like, she called it like jut, right? So it's like the opposite of what one of our vows is, which is telling the truth and truthfulness. And so I remember sitting with that for a while, and thinking, how can I align, what I want to do with my tradition? And so I actually found this story that I thought was quite interesting. I think it's about, I don't remember it very well completely right now, so I might get it wrong, but I think it's about a monk who was sitting in the woods, and he saw a cow go past. And then, several hours later, he saw a band of hunters come past, and they asked him, they said, did a cow come past this way? And obviously, Jainism teaches us we have to be truthful. But in this instance, because in order to prevent violence from taking place, he actually said no. He said no, there's no cow actually came past this way, and so he actually lied. But it was in service to protecting the cow. So the hunters went home and probably had a nice plant-based meal that night, and the cow did the same, right? So I found that, and I brought that to her, and I remember her being quite not taken aback, but surprised that I had done that, research and stuff. And so I just wanted to share, that's how I align, how can I stay true to my Jain beliefs while also working in this industry. And a big part of that is if I can incorporate my principles and my ethics of non-violence into what I write, and also if I can be honest and truthful in not obviously the characters I write are false, but if their emotions are genuine and authentic, it actually not only makes me a better Jain in my mind, but it also makes me a better writer. So that's just my story there.
If I may just add one thing to Nisha's story is one of the underlying threads of the application of ahimsa really is understanding feedback loops and our impact on what we do. And so from a secular perspective, if you are promoting an understanding of feedback loops in terms of the output of your work and its sort of impact on the environment, many times we are unconscious and disassociated from the impact of our work, and so we don't know that we're polluting and causing harm downstream. And so any sort of activity that closes that gap, that makes us aware of the downstream impacts of our work, is essentially more, it's aligning us with ahimsa. And so when I think about ESG, in a way, it's a very, very rough and early sort of baby steps in bringing corporate America to be more aligned with its downstream impacts, and in a way, it's closing the feedback loop, and in a way, it's more aligned with reducing or not causing harm. So just wanted to kind of bring up ESG and the closure of feedback loops as a way of actually practicing what we believe.
Yeah, I'd like to add something too. I like Tanisha's story a lot, and it's a very good example of a kind of concrete situation that we analyze in a business ethics course, especially when you're teaching students that are between the ages of 18 and 22. And so here are some of the other concepts that apply directly to this situation. So one is that when the person walking by the monk asks, did a cow come this way? Independent of Jainism, there's a first question is, does the person have a right to that knowledge, right? So we would talk about the question of whether or not someone merely asking a question has a right to know something. And if they don't have a right to know something, if you don't tell them anything or you say something that's false, how is the relationship between what you assert being a lie in relationship to their right to know? So this is a very common theme that's discussed in talking and saying and evaluating whether something is a lie in the first place is relative to a question someone's asking and the issue of the right to know. Then the second one is what is oftentimes known as the completeness condition on truth. And this is an idea that is so important in Jainism, but it's actually explored a lot outside of Jainism. And it's one of the areas where I think Jainism has some of the most wonderful ideas to help us understand the completeness condition because of the way in which they think about omniscience and who can be omniscient in the Jain tradition. So in the completeness condition, we distinguish between commissive and omissive lies. So a commissive lie is when you say something that you knowingly or you believe to be false to someone's question, and an omissive one is when you leave something out. And so sometimes when people are telling stories or being a reporter, they end up giving something less than the complete truth because the complete truth is actually an infinite set of sentences that can never be asserted, and it's infinitely deep and rich. So one of the ways in which we can think about this is whether or not someone is reporting all the relevant information that they can in the amount of time that's given to them, and whether or not they're engaging in commissive and omissive versions of lying. So I think these ideas, like and these concrete cases, they're very fruitful to discuss and think about the different analytical tools we have to understanding how to bring them in alignment with Jain principles, but also to understand how different traditions approach the concrete case with different analytical tools. I really like the story. Thank you for sharing, Nisha.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nisha, for sharing that story. And I think it just shows how how deep Jainism goes into the application of various scenarios, right? That it's not just truth, but there's different underlying factors that change that. Uh, if anyone else wants to share any thoughts on challenges you face trying to incorporate your values at the workplace, or maybe I think Chris had introduced an interesting conversation about different career paths, right? Like there's certain career paths that are just just completely unjained by nature, right? And I think maybe the more obvious one is like if you're in animal agriculture, right? That would be a industry that would be just very tough to align with Jain values. Although there's like I believe there's like certain stories and cases where if it's like a need like life or death situation, perhaps there's a way to make it. But if you have an option to choose another industry or career, that would probably be preferable. Um, I and so I guess I'll kind of open it up there. Is anyone else want to share any thoughts about career paths that are just like maybe non-Jane or not aligned with our values, and how do you go about it in such a way?
I could probably chime in a little bit here. Sunny, thanks for the question. So coming from a consulting background, this is actually where I struggled deeply, or in the consulting industry in general. For example, the business development lifecycle, right? It's consulting in general is there's work that's completed, and it almost feels like there needs to be a hook that's left there so that there's follow-on work, right? And this was a struggle in the incentive model with the firm that I was at. Essentially, didn't align, right? And I struggled a lot. There's politics, there's certain business development activities like dinners, steakhouses was sort of the norm, and those kind of challenges systematically and structurally, I feel are uh, sort of part of majority of the functions, types of, I guess, industries and sectors. So I would love to see this list of the professions, but really sort of the question is how do you systemically and structurally evolve, whether, instead of just starting something on your own, right? Um, that's definitely one of the ways, especially entrepreneurship. It's been wonderful. Not making a whole lot of money, but sleeping a lot better at night. And so, yeah, I'm deeply curious about, other people's perspectives around this as well.
And I'll just quickly say that I realize that we're kind of running up on the hour, and so for any of the panelists that have to drop off, please feel free. If it's okay, we'll keep this conversation going for a little bit longer. If anyone in the audience wants to just come on stage and share any thoughts, please feel free. But in terms of like the official event, you're welcome to drop off if you have to. So just want to share that. And I also see Apurva has joined us. Apurva, welcome. If you want to introduce yourself and if you have any thoughts on, business ethics in general as a Jain, like how do you incorporate Jainism, whether you have any challenges incorporating, your ethics in the workplace, or just anything in general that was said earlier, please feel free to share your thoughts. And you can unmute by clicking the mic button on the bottom right corner of your screen. I guess in the meanwhile, if anyone else wants to share any thoughts, please feel free.
Sunny, if I may, just tell everyone really quickly, just to invite you all one more time, if anybody's interested in taking a course in Jain professional ethics, we are having a course that starts on April 16th this weekend, 10-week course with Dr. Anand Vaidya, who's here. We're going to be talking about a lot of these issues in great detail through that course that Dr. Vaidya is going to be teaching. And we decided that we would give our scholarship code on this. If anybody wants to take it for free, we run a nonprofit. That's why we're able to offer it for free. And the code for that is A Spring 2022. And I'll put the link again in the chat for anyone that's interested in studying Jain business ethics and continuing this conversation and joining us for that class. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you everyone again. I guess if there's no other thoughts, we can go ahead and begin wrapping up and closing the room. Just want to thank Arihanta Academy again and thank all the panelists, Chris, Miheer, Anand, Komal, and Kobby for your thoughts and your perspectives. Definitely a very interesting topic and conversation, which, I feel should definitely be talked more about. And I know like a lot of us are in our workplaces and we're working and we run into a lot of like interesting dilemmas and situations, and it's at that point where we wonder, am I doing the right thing? Is this aligned with my values, right? And I think having this course and this topic as a discipline is so important, especially in times like that. So thank you everyone again. We'll go ahead and close out the room.
Thank you, Sonny. Appreciate this discussion. Thank you for putting this together.
Thanks again, everyone.